Ethan Carter had always prided himself on being adventurous. Whether it was skydiving over the Grand Canyon or eating questionable street food in Bangkok, he lived for experiences that made his heart race and his Instagram feed pop. But nothing, not even bungee jumping off a glacier, could have prepared him for this moment. Standing in front of one of the most opulent palaces in the galaxy, Ethan felt like he'd stepped straight into a sci-fi movie. Unfortunately, he was about to discover that intergalactic tourism came with its own set of rules he was about to break spectacularly. The planet's Ethereum stretched out before him like a kaleidoscope come to life. Its cities were built from crystalline alloys that refracted sunlight into an ever-shifting rainbow of colors. Towering spires pierced the lavender-hued sky, their surfaces alive with pulsating holograms advertising everything from luxury spa treatments to zero-gravity dance clubs. Hovercars zipped silently through the air, leaving trails of shimmering light behind them. Even the ground beneath Ethan's feet seemed otherworldly. Translucent tiles embedded with glowing circuits formed pathways that hummed faintly as people walked over them. But none of these wonders held Ethan's attention quite like the royal palace. It loomed ahead, a monolithic structure so grand it almost hurt to look at. The palace walls shimmered like liquid gold, reflecting the twin suns of Zetherian's solar system. Guards clad in ceremonial uniforms patrolled the perimeter, their armor gleaming with intricate patterns that shifted subtly whenever they moved. Each guard carried a staff tipped with what appeared to be a miniature plasma torch, casting flickering shadows across the courtyard. Ethan adjusted the strap of his backpack, feeling both exhilarated and slightly out of place. He'd booked this trip as part of an intergalactic travel package advertised as the ultimate cosmic adventure. So far, it had delivered, though not necessarily in ways he'd expected. For starters, no one had warned him about the sheer strangeness of alien etiquette. On Earth, you could get away with snapping photos of landmarks without much fuss. Here, not so much. Every time Ethan raised his camera, locals shot him disapproving glares. One elderly Zetherian woman had actually scolded him in a language he didn't understand, shaking her fist and pointing at a nearby sign that read in universal script, "Photography prohibited without royal consent." Still, Ethan figured he wasn't doing any real harm. After all, he was just a tourist trying to capture memories. Besides, how was he supposed to know every little thing here was steeped in tradition and symbolism? Take those guards, for example. Their uniforms weren't just fancy costumes. They were sacred garments woven with nanofibers designed to symbolize loyalty to the monarchy. Or at least that's what Ethan would later learn. At the moment, all he saw were shiny outfits begging to be photographed. He sidled closer to the palace gates, angling his camera lens for the perfect shot. A group of guards stood nearby, their towering figures exuding authority. Ethan grinned nervously and waved. "Hey there," he called out, hoping to charm them into letting him take a picture. Instead, they stared back impassively, their faces obscured by sleek visors. Undeterred, Ethan decided to try a different approach. Reaching into his pocket, he pulled out his trusty plasma lighter, a small silver gadget shaped like a miniature spaceship. He bought it at a sketchy spaceport gift shop during the layover, mostly because it looked cool. Now he flipped it open dramatically, mimicking a trick he'd seen online where someone used a lighter to ignite sparks midair. "Check this out," Ethan said, grinning ear to ear as he sparked the flame. "Pretty neat, huh?" The reaction was instantaneous and catastrophic. The tiny flame leaped toward the nearest guard, catching the hem of his uniform. Within seconds, the fabric erupted into a blaze of brilliant orange and blue. The guard stumbled backward, flailing wildly as smoke billowed around him. His comrades shouted in alarm, rushing to help while bystanders screamed and scattered. For a split second, Ethan stood frozen, staring in disbelief. Then reality hit him like a freight train. "Oh crap," he muttered, dropping the lighter. "I didn't mean to do that." Panic surged through him as he watched the chaos unfold. The burning guard was now rolling on the ground, desperately trying to extinguish the flames. Other guards surrounded him, using their plasma-tipped staves to create barriers of fireproof energy. Meanwhile, drones descended from above, scanning the scene with red laser beams. Ethan realized too late that he'd committed more than just a social faux pas. He'd ignited something far worse. Outrage. Before he could even think of apologizing, robotic enforcers swooped in, grabbing him by the arms. These weren't ordinary bots. They were sleek, humanoid machines with glowing eyes and hydraulic limbs capable of crushing steel. Ethan struggled futilely as they lifted him off the ground, dragging him away from the scene. "What the hell is going on?" he yelled, twisting in their grip. "It was an accident, I swear." No one answered. The crowd parted as the enforcers marched him toward a hovering transport pod. As he passed the smoldering remains of the guard's uniform, Ethan caught a glimpse of Commander Kell, the officer who'd been wearing it. Through the haze of smoke, Kell's face was twisted with fury. His piercing gaze locked onto Ethan, promising retribution. Inside the transport pod, Ethan slumped against the cold metal floor, his mind racing. How had things gone so wrong so fast? One minute he'd been enjoying the sights, the next he was public enemy number one. And then it hit him. This wasn't just some minor infraction. On Zetherian, damaging royal property wasn't considered vandalism, it was treason. As the pod sped away, Ethan tried to piece together what he knew about the planet's legal system. From snippets of conversations he'd overheard, trials here were resolved quickly, sometimes within hours. Sentencing was equally swift, ranging from hefty fines to, well, he didn't want to think about the worst-case scenario. All he knew was that he needed help, and fast. The pod landed outside a towering building labeled Central Judiciary Complex. Ethan was hauled inside, past rows of glowing screens displaying alien text, and into a sterile holding cell. The walls pulsed faintly with bioluminescent patterns, and a disembodied voice announced, "Detainee secured." Trial preparation begins immediately. Ethan sank onto the hard bench, running a hand through his hair. This couldn't be happening. He was just a guy who liked taking pictures and showing off cool gadgets. Sure, he might have been reckless, but he wasn't malicious. Why couldn't anyone see that? As if in response to his thoughts, the door slid open, revealing a striking figure silhouetted against the bright hallway. She stepped inside, her neon blue hair catching the light, and fixed him with a steely glare. "I'm Lyra Voss," she said briskly, tossing a datapad onto the bench beside him. "Your lawyer. Consider yourself lucky. I don't usually waste my time on idiots." Ethan blinked, momentarily speechless. Thanks." Lyra crossed her arms, unimpressed. "Don't thank me yet. You're facing charges of desecration of royal property, public endangerment, and conspiracy against the monarchy. If we don't win this case, you'll be executed within 24 hours." Ethan's jaw dropped. Executed for lighting a guy's jacket on fire. "It's not a jacket," Lyra snapped. "It's a symbol of authority, imbued with centuries of cultural significance. Trust me, they take this seriously." Ethan groaned, burying his face in his hands. "Great, just great. Can't we just explain it was an accident?" "We can try," Lyra admitted. "But Zetherian's courts operate on quantum logic. Verdicts are calculated instantly based on probability algorithms. Unless we give the AI judge overwhelming evidence of your innocence, it'll side with the prosecution." Ethan sat up, panic rising again. "So what do we do?" Lyra studied him for a moment, her expression softening slightly. "We fight. But first, you need to tell me everything that happened." And so Ethan launched into his story, recounting every detail from the moment he arrived at the palace gates to the disastrous encounter with the guard. As he spoke, Lyra listened intently, occasionally jotting notes on her datapad. When he finished, she leaned back, tapping her chin thoughtfully. "There's something off about this," she murmured. "Why would a seasoned commander wear such flammable material in public?" "Nanofiber uniforms are designed to resist heat damage." Ethan frowned. "You think someone set me up?" "It's possible," Lyra said grimly. "If we can prove sabotage, we might stand a chance. But time's running out. Your trial starts in less than an hour." Ethan swallowed hard, the weight of his predicament settling heavily on his shoulders. For the first time in his life, he realized that his carefree attitude had landed him in serious trouble. And if he wanted to survive, he'd have to rely on someone else's expertise, someone who clearly had no patience for fools. As Lyra began outlining their defense strategy, Ethan couldn't shake the image of Commander Kell's furious glare. Whatever happened next, one thing was certain. He'd never look at a lighter or a palace gate the same way again. Ethan's holding cell wasn't designed for comfort. The bench he sat on was cold and unyielding, its surface smooth but devoid of any cushioning. Neon lines pulsed rhythmically along the walls, casting shifting patterns of light that made it feel like the room itself was alive. If Ethan squinted just right, and he did, because staring at those glowing circuits beat thinking about his impending doom, it almost looked like the walls were breathing, and judging him. Lyra Voss stood across from him, arms crossed, her neon blue hair catching the ambient glow. She tapped her foot impatiently as she scrolled through the datapad Ethan had spilled his guts into moments earlier. Her expression remained unreadable, though Ethan could tell by the way her jaw tightened that she wasn't thrilled with what she'd heard so far. So, Ethan ventured, breaking the silence. What's the verdict? Am I doomed? Lyra glanced up, raising an eyebrow. You mean besides the literal verdict you'll get in court? Yeah, pretty much. Ethan groaned, slumping further onto the bench. Simon, throw me a bone here. Isn't there some loophole or technicality we can use? Like, diplomatic immunity, or maybe claiming insanity? You're not insane, Lyra said dryly. Just monumentally stupid. Gee, thanks. She ignored his sarcasm, pacing back and forth. Look, I'll level with you. This isn't going to be easy. Ditherian's judicial system doesn't mess around. Once the AI judge calculates probabilities based on the evidence, the ruling is final. No appeals, no second chances, and trust me, they don't go easy on off-worlders who embarrass the monarchy. Ethan winced. Yeah, burning a guy's uniform probably didn't help my case. No kidding. Lara stopped pacing and turned to face him. But listen carefully, because this is important. If we can prove that Commander Kell tampered with his own uniform, making it more flammable than usual, we might have a shot at turning public opinion in our favor. People hate hypocrisy almost as much as they hate treason. Ethan perked up slightly. So, you think someone set me up? It's plausible, Lyra admitted. Kell's reputation precedes him. He's notorious for being overly zealous when it comes to enforcing royal protocols. Some say he uses every opportunity to tighten the monarchy's grip on society. If he orchestrated this whole thing to make an example out of you, it wouldn't surprise me. Ethan rubbed his temples, feeling a headache coming on. Great. So now I'm caught in some intergalactic power struggle between a psycho commander and a bunch of stuck-up royals. Just my luck. Lyra smirked faintly. Welcome to Zetherian. Now, let's focus on survival. First order of business, prepping your testimony. You need to sound remorseful without sounding pathetic. Got it? Remorseful, but not pathetic. Ethan repeated, nodding. Got it. Good. Lyra pulled up a holographic interface on her wrist console, projecting a series of prompts into the air. Here's how it's going to go. When the prosecutor presents their case, they'll paint you as reckless and disrespectful. We counter by emphasizing cultural misunderstandings and highlighting the unintentional nature of your actions. Then, during your testimony, you'll explain yourself clearly and sincerely. Think you can handle that? Ethan shrugged. Sure, I've been winging it my whole life. Why stop now? Lyra rolled her eyes. Fantastic. A natural-born improviser. Exactly what we need in a high-stakes courtroom drama. Despite her sarcasm, Ethan could tell she was warming up to him, if only slightly. There was something oddly comforting about Lyra's no-nonsense attitude. Sure, she called him an idiot repeatedly, but at least she wasn't sugarcoating things. On Earth, lawyers tended to dance around bad news until you wanted to scream. Lyra cut straight to the point, which, oddly enough, made him feel less anxious. As they worked through potential questions and answers, Ethan noticed something strange. Every time Lyra mentioned Commander Kell, her tone shifted ever so slightly. It wasn't anger exactly, more like frustration mixed with suspicion. You really don't like this guy, do you? Ethan asked after one particularly scathing comment about Kell's methods. Lyra paused, her fingers hovering over the holographic interface. For a moment, she seemed lost in thought. Then she sighed and leaned against the wall. Let's just say Kell has a history of bending the rules to suit his agenda. He's smart, ruthless, and always 3 steps ahead. If anyone could orchestrate a setup like this, it's him. But why target me? Ethan pressed. I'm nobody. Just a clueless tourist. Exactly, Lyra said sharply. That's what makes you the perfect scapegoat. No connections, no influence. If Kell wants to push through stricter laws or drum up support for his reforms, blaming an outsider is the easiest way to rally the public. Ethan frowned, absorbing this information. So I'm collateral damage in his little political game. Pretty much. Lovely. They continued strategizing, running through scenarios and refining their arguments. At one point, Ethan tried to lighten the mood by offering Lyra a snack from his backpack, a bag of stale chips he'd smuggled aboard the spaceship. She wrinkled her nose in disgust. What is that? She asked, eyeing the crumpled bag warily. Chips, Ethan replied proudly. Earth delicacy. Want some? Lyra stared at him like he'd just offered her a live buck. Your food tastes like regret. Ethan laughed despite himself. Well, excuse me for trying to share my culture. That's not culture, Lyra shot back. That's punishment. Their banter helped ease the tension, even if only briefly. But as the minutes ticked away, the reality of their situation loomed larger. With each passing second, Ethan felt the weight of his predicament pressing down on him. He'd never faced anything like this before. Back home, mistakes were usually forgiven with a laugh and a shrug. Here, they came with consequences far beyond anything he'd imagined. Finally, Lyra closed her datapad and fixed him with a serious look. All right, here's the plan. During the trial, stick to the script. Don't improvise unless absolutely necessary. And whatever you do, don't antagonize the AI judge. It's programmed to prioritize efficiency over mercy, so keep your answers concise and respectful. Ethan nodded, swallowing hard. Got it. Concise and respectful. And remember, Lyra added, her voice softening slightly, you're not alone in this. I'll do everything I can to get you out of it. For the first time since arriving on Zetherian, Ethan felt a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, they could pull this off. But deep down, he knew it wouldn't be easy. Not with Commander Kell gunning for him and an entire planet watching his every move. The door slid open, revealing a robotic bailiff. Trial preparation complete. Proceed to the courtroom. Lyra grabbed her datapad and motioned for Ethan to follow. As they stepped into the hallway, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking straight into a lion's den. The air buzzed with anticipation, and the glowing walls seemed to pulse faster, as if eager to witness the spectacle about to unfold. Ready? Lyra asked, glancing back at him. As ready as I'll ever be, Ethan muttered, forcing a grin. Inside, the courtroom awaited. A cavernous chamber filled with floating spectator pods, holographic displays, and a massive AI judge shaped like a pulsating orb. The atmosphere crackled with tension, and all eyes turned toward Ethan as he entered. Cameras flashed, capturing his every step. Somewhere in the crowd, Ethan spotted Commander Kale, his face a mask of smug satisfaction. This is it, Lyra whispered, her voice steady but firm. Time to fight. Ethan nodded, steeling himself for what lay ahead. Whatever happened next, one thing was certain. He'd never forget this day, or the fiery mess that started it all. The Zetherian courtroom was unlike anything Ethan had ever seen or imagined. It wasn't just a legal venue. It was a spectacle, a grand theater designed to awe and intimidate. The massive chamber stretched upward like an endless dome, its ceiling lost in a haze of swirling holograms that projected live feeds of the trial across the galaxy. Floating spectator pods hovered above, each one packed with curious citizens watching the drama unfold. Below, rows of benches lined the floor, occupied by diplomats, journalists, and ordinary people eager to witness justice or entertainment or stand. At the center of it all stood the AI judge, a pulsating orb suspended midair, its surface rippling with iridescent colors that shifted unpredictably. To Ethan, it looked less like a judicial entity and more like a sentient disco ball. Still, he knew better than to underestimate it. This glowing sphere held his fate in its algorithmic hands. Ethan shuffled nervously beside Lyra as they took their positions at the defense podium. Across the aisle, the prosecution team loomed like a wall of judgment, led by a holographic avatar of Zetherian's Chief Justice, whose stern expression seemed carved from granite. Behind them sat Commander Kale, his uniform now pristine but his glare still fiery. Ethan avoided meeting his eyes, focusing instead on the faint hum of the AI judge as it processed data streams flowing into its core. Ready? Lyra whispered under her breath, adjusting the strap of her datapad holster. As ready as I'll ever be, Ethan muttered, clutching the edge of the podium for support. His palms were slick with sweat, and his heart pounded so loudly he was sure everyone could hear it. The AI judge emitted a low chime, signaling the start of the proceedings. A booming voice echoed through the chamber, synthesized yet authoritative. Case number 4729A. Desecration of royal property and treason against the monarchy. Defendant, Ethan Carter, human tourist. Proceed. The prosecutor stepped forward, bowing slightly to the AI judge before launching into their opening statement. They spoke with practiced precision, their words dripping with disdain as they painted Ethan as reckless, disrespectful, and dangerously ignorant of Zetherian's sacred traditions. Your Honor, the prosecutor began, gesturing dramatically toward a holographic display that materialized in the air. This individual, Ethan Carter, stands accused of committing an act of unparalleled insolence. On this day, he willfully ignited the ceremonial uniform of Commander Kale, a garment imbued with centuries of cultural significance, reducing it to ashes in mere moments. As the prosecutor spoke, the hologram played slow-motion footage of Ethan flipping open his plasma lighter and sparking the flame. The crowd gasped collectively as the uniform burst into flames, capturing every detail of the disaster. Ethan cringed, wishing he could disappear into the floor. Even worse, the prosecutor accompanied the visuals with dramatic music, a deep, ominous score that made the incident feel like the climax of an action movie. And let us not forget, the prosecutor continued, turning to address the audience directly, the potential harm caused to Commander Kell himself. Had the nanofibers combusted differently, we might have been mourning a casualty today. Instead, we are left with a symbol of defiance, an insult to our monarchy, and a threat to the stability of our society. The crowd murmured in agreement, casting disapproving glances at Ethan. He felt like a bug under a microscope, scrutinized and condemned by strangers who didn't even know him. Lyra leaned close, whispering encouragement. "Don't react. Stay calm. We got this." When it was their turn to present, Lyra strode confidently to the center of the room, her neon blue hair catching the light like a beacon. She addressed the AI judge with unwavering poise, her voice cutting through the tension like a blade. "Your Honor," she began, "while the prosecution seeks to paint my client as a villain, the truth is far simpler and far less sinister. Ethan Carter is not a saboteur or a revolutionary. He is a tourist unfamiliar with our customs, guilty only of making a tragic mistake." She activated her own holographic display, showing security footage from multiple angles. As you can see, Mr. Carter's actions were unintentional. He was attempting to demonstrate a novelty device, a plasma lighter, from his home planet. Unaware of the flammability of Commander Kell's uniform, he inadvertently sparked a reaction no one could have foreseen. The crowd stirred, intrigued by this new perspective. Lyra pressed on, her tone sharp and persuasive. Furthermore, recent evidence suggests that Commander Kale may have tampered with his own uniform prior to the incident. Data logs retrieved from palace surveillance indicate unauthorized adjustments to the nanofiber composition, increasing its susceptibility to heat. A ripple of shock spread through the courtroom. Heads turned toward Kale, whose face darkened with barely concealed fury. Ethan couldn't help but smirk, though Lyra quickly elbowed him to wipe the grin off his face. "To suggest that my client orchestrated this event is absurd," Lyra concluded. "He is a victim of circumstance, manipulated by forces beyond his control. I urge this court to consider the facts impartially and render a verdict based on truth, not speculation." The prosecutor countered immediately, dismissing Lyra's claims as baseless accusations. "There is no concrete proof of sabotage," they argued. "Commander Kell is a decorated officer with an impeccable record. To impugn his integrity without evidence is an affront to this court." Back and forth the arguments went, each side presenting their case with mounting intensity. Ethan watched it all unfold like a tennis match, his anxiety spiking with every exchange. When the AI judge announced it was time for testimony, his stomach churned. It was his turn to take the stand. Testimony under fire. Ethan approached the witness platform, feeling like every eye in the galaxy was trained on him. The AI judge's orb pulsed brighter, scanning his vitals and analyzing his emotional state. Ethan swallowed hard, trying to steady his breathing. "State your name and purpose," the judge intoned. Ethan Carter. I'm here because I set someone on fire. Sort of." Murmurs erupted in the crowd. Lyra shot him a warning glance, mouthing, "Stick to the script." The prosecutors seized the opportunity, stepping forward with a predatory gleam in their eyes. "Mr. Carter, would you agree that using a plasma device in proximity to royal guards constitutes reckless behavior?" Ethan hesitated, then nodded reluctantly. "Yeah, okay, fair point. But I didn't know what I was doing. Back on Earth, lighters are harmless. People use them for tricks, camping, stuff like that. I thought it'd be cool to show off." "So you admit to deliberately igniting the flame?" "No," Ethan exclaimed, raising his hands defensively. "I mean, yes, I lit the lighter. But I didn't think it would catch anything on fire. Honest." The prosecutor smirked, clearly enjoying themselves. "And yet Commander Kale's uniform burned to a crisp. How do you explain that?" Before Ethan could stammer out a response, Lyra interjected smoothly. "Objection, Your Honor." My client has already acknowledged the accidental nature of his actions. Harping on irrelevant details serves only to waste time. The AI judge chimed again, its voice neutral but firm, sustained. Prosecutor, move on. Flustered but undeterred, the prosecutor pivoted to a different line of questioning. Mr. Carter, are you aware of Zetherian's laws regarding desecration of royal property? Ethan shook his head. Nope, totally clueless. That's kind of the problem, isn't it? If someone had told me, hey, don't wave fire near these guys, I wouldn't have done it. Another ripple of laughter swept through the crowd, easing some of the tension. Ethan relaxed slightly, realizing that maybe, just maybe, he wasn't entirely hated. Finally, it was Lyra's turn to question him. She guided him gently, helping him articulate his remorse while steering clear of incriminating statements. By the time he finished, Ethan felt a flicker of hope. Maybe they actually stood a chance. Chaos erupts. Just as the AI judge began calculating probabilities, a deafening crash shattered the silence. A rogue drone plummeted from the ceiling, smashing into the prosecutor's podium and sending shards of metal flying. Alarms blared, red lights flashed, and panic swept through the courtroom. What the hell is going on? Ethan shouted, ducking instinctively. Lyra grabbed his arm, pulling him toward the nearest exit. We need to go, now. But the trial. Forget the trial. Move. As chaos engulfed the chamber, Ethan and Lyra sprinted down the corridor, pursued by armed drones and angry guards. Behind them, Commander Kale barked orders, his voice echoing through the halls. This isn't over, Lyra panted as they rounded a corner. But for now, survival comes first. Ethan grinned despite himself. Guess we're doing this the hard way. Now we run, Lyra replied grimly. Kale won't take this lying down. She was right. Moments later, the alarms resumed, louder and more insistent than before. The AI judge's synthesized voice boomed through the speakers. Verdict recalculated. Charges against Ethan Carter dismissed due to mitigating circumstances. Arrest Commander Kale for tampering with royal property. While the announcement was music to Ethan's ears, it also meant Kale would stop at nothing to evade capture and pin the blame on someone else. Sure enough, as they emerged from the archive room, they found themselves face to face with a squadron of heavily armed guards. A narrow escape. Thinking quickly, Ethan raised the plasma disruptor and fired blindly, creating a burst of energy that temporarily disabled the nearest drone. Sparks flew, and the corridor descended into confusion as other drones collided with debris. Seizing the opportunity, Lyra grabbed Ethan's arm and dragged him toward an emergency exit. They burst into the open air, finding themselves on a maintenance catwalk suspended high above the city. Below, hovercars zipped through the streets, oblivious to the drama unfolding above them. To their left, a service ladder led down to street level, but getting there wouldn't be easy. Jump, Lyra commanded, pointing to a nearby platform connected by a narrow bridge. Ethan balked. Are you insane? That thing looks like it's held together by duct tape. Do you trust me or not? Lyra shot back, already halfway across. With no other options, Ethan took a deep breath and leaped, landing clumsily on the rickety bridge. It swayed dangerously under his weight, but he managed to cross without plummeting to his doom. By the time they reached the ladder, the guards were closing in fast. Descending as quickly as possible, they hit the ground running, weaving through alleys, and dodging pedestrians until they reached a secluded subway tunnel. Panting and covered in grime, they collapsed against the wall, finally allowing themselves a brief moment of respite. Revelations and resolutions. As they caught their breath, Ethan turned to Lyra, gratitude shining in his eyes. Thanks, he said sincerely. I owe you big time. Lyra shrugged, brushing dust off her jacket. Don't mention it. Just doing my job. But Ethan shook his head. No, seriously. You didn't have to stick your neck out for me. Most people would have written me off as a lost cause. For the first time since meeting her, Ethan saw a hint of vulnerability in Lyra's gaze. Let's just say I've seen how these systems can crush innocent people. I wasn't about to let it happen again, not on my watch. Her words lingered in the air, adding depth to her character and hinting at personal stakes Ethan hadn't considered before. Before he could press further, however, his comm device buzzed insistently. Frowning, he pulled it out and activated the message. It was short and cryptic. The uniform wasn't random. You've been played. Ethan frowned, showing the message to Lyra. What does that mean? Her expression darkened. It means this isn't over. Someone wanted you to torch that uniform, for reasons we haven't uncovered yet. Suddenly, Ethan realized the full scope of what they were dealing with. This wasn't just about Kale. It was part of something bigger, something sinister lurking beneath Cytherean's glittering surface. We need answers, Ethan said firmly. And I'm not leaving until we find them. Lyra smirked, impressed despite herself. Starting to grow on me, Earthboy. Together, they stepped deeper into the shadows, ready to uncover the truth and face whatever dangers lay ahead. The subway tunnel stretched endlessly before them, its walls lined with pulsating bioluminescent fungi that cast an eerie green glow. The air was damp and cool, carrying the faint hum of distant machinery. Ethan adjusted his grip on the plasma disruptor, still feeling uneasy about wielding such advanced alien tech. Beside him, Lyra moved with purpose, her neon blue hair shimmering like a beacon in the dim light. So, Ethan said, breaking the silence, what exactly are we looking for down here? Answers. Lyra replied curtly, her eyes scanning the surroundings. If someone went through all this trouble to frame you, they're hiding something big. And if I know anything about Cytherean, it's that secrets don't stay buried forever. Ethan nodded, though he wasn't entirely reassured. Secrets meant danger, and given their recent brush with killer drones and vengeful commanders, he had enough excitement to last a lifetime. Still, curiosity burned within him. Who had orchestrated the sev, and why? They followed the tunnel until it opened into a vast underground cavern, illuminated by glowing crystals embedded in the ceiling. Below, a sprawling network of tunnels and makeshift structures formed what could only be described as a hidden city. Hovercarts zipped along narrow pathways, while figures clad in tattered robes bustled about, exchanging goods and whispered conversations. This is it, Lyra murmured. The rebel base. Ethan blinked in surprise. You mean there's an actual rebellion here? Not officially, Lyra explained. But discontent with the monarchy has been growing for years. These people live in fear of Kale and his enforcers, but they're tired of being silenced. If anyone knows what's really going on, it's them. As they descended into the rebel enclave, heads turned in their direction. Some faces were wary, others curious. A few even recognized Ethan from the trial broadcast, whispering among themselves. One figure stepped forward, a tall, wiry man with a scar running down his cheek and a datapad strapped to his belt. You're brave showing your face here, the man said, his voice low and gravelly. Or stupid. Relax, Jurek, Lyra interjected. He's with me. Jurek raised an eyebrow, but didn't press further. Instead, he gestured for them to follow him deeper into the enclave. They passed rows of tents and makeshift shelters, each one alive with activity. Children played with holographic toys powered by scavenged tech, while elders tinkered with ancient-looking devices. It was a stark contrast to the polished perfection of Cytherean's surface, a reminder of the inequality simmering beneath the planet's glittering facade. Finally, they reached a command center housed inside a repurposed cargo container. Maps and schematics covered the walls, detailing everything from palace layouts to supply routes. At the center of it all stood a woman in her late 30s, her sharp features framed by braided hair streaked with silver. She introduced herself as Commander Vera, leader of the resistance movement. We've been watching you, Vera said, fixing Ethan with a piercing gaze. Both of you. Your little stunt at the palace exposed cracks in the monarchy's armor. Now everyone's talking. That was never my intention, Ethan protested, holding up his hands defensively. I just wanted to take pictures, and maybe buy some souvenirs. Vera smirked, clearly amused. Intentions aside, you've done us a favor. But now you're in too deep to back out. Tell me, Earthboy, how much do you know about Cytherean's royal family? Ethan hesitated, glancing at Lyra for guidance. She gave him a subtle nod, encouraging him to speak freely. Well, not much. Just that they're, kind of strict, and really into shiny uniforms. Vera chuckled, shaking her head. Understatement of the century. The royals aren't just rulers, they're puppets. Their decisions are dictated by corporate interests from Earth, eager to exploit our resources. Nanofibers, energy cores, rare minerals, you name it, they want it. Lyra chimed in, her tone sharp. And Kale? He's their enforcer. His reforms aren't about protecting traditions. They're about tightening control so corporations can operate without interference. Ethan's stomach churned as the pieces clicked into place. So, lighting that uniform wasn't random. Someone wanted to make me look bad to push these reforms through. Exactly, Vera confirmed. But there's more. We intercepted communications suggesting Kale's sabotage was part of a larger conspiracy. They're planning a coup to install a puppet ruler loyal to Earth's elite. Ethan stared at her, stunned. A coup. Like overthrow the monarchy coup. The ultimate power grab. Vera replied grimly. Which is why we need your help. My help? Ethan repeated incredulously. What can I possibly do? I'm just a guy who accidentally set someone on fire. You're underestimating yourself, Lyra countered. Your actions have already shaken public opinion. If we play this right, we can expose the truth and rally support for real change. Ethan hesitated, weighing the risks against the potential rewards. On one hand, he'd come to Zetherian seeking adventure, but this was far beyond anything he imagined. On the other hand, walking away felt wrong. He couldn't unsee what he'd learned, and he owed it to Lyra and himself to see this through. All right, he said finally. What's the plan? Infiltration and discovery. The rebels devised a bold strategy. Infiltrate the palace during the upcoming royal gala, where dignitaries from across the galaxy would gather to celebrate the monarchy's supposed stability. Using forged credentials, Ethan and Lyra would pose as catering staff, gaining access to restricted areas. Meanwhile, the rebels would stage a diversion to draw attention away from their mission. Dressed in generic uniforms and armed with concealed gadgets, Ethan and Lyra slipped into the palace undetected. The grand hall buzzed with activity, filled with opulent decorations and guests dressed in extravagant attire. Despite the luxurious surroundings, tension hung thick in the air, palpable even to outsiders like Ethan. Their target was the Royal Archives, a secure vault rumored to contain classified documents detailing the monarchy's dealings with Earth corporations. With Lyra's hacking skills and Ethan's knack for improvisation, they managed to bypass multiple layers of security and retrieve the files they needed. But as they prepared to leave, disaster struck. An alarm blared, red lights flashing as automated defenses activated. Guards swarmed the area, led by none other than Commander Kale, who wore a smug grin. I knew you'd lead me straight to the evidence, Kale sneered, raising his plasma-tipped staff. Now surrender or die. Ethan glanced at Lyra, panic rising. Any bright ideas? She smirked, pulling out a small device. Always. Pressing a button, she unleashed a burst of electromagnetic interference, disabling nearby drones and creating chaos. Seizing the opportunity, they bolted toward the exit, dodging blasts of energy and collapsing debris. Showdown and revelation. The chase culminated in a dramatic confrontation atop the palace spire, overlooking the entire city. Kale cornered them, his fury evident as he lunged forward with lethal precision. In a desperate move, Ethan used his plasma disruptor to disable Kale's weapon, leaving him vulnerable. You think this changes anything? Kale spat, backing away. Even if you expose the truth, the system will endure. You're nothing but pawns in a game you don't understand. Before either side could act, reinforcements arrived, this time loyalists to the true monarch, who had secretly aligned with the rebels. They arrested Kale, confiscating incriminating data that implicated not only him but also several high-ranking officials tied to Earth's corporate elite. As dawn broke over Zetherian, Ethan and Lyra stood side by side, watching the skyline shimmer with renewed hope. Public outrage had forced the monarchy to dissolve corrupt alliances, paving the way for reform. But their victory came with a warning. As Ethan received another mysterious transmission, this time from a distant spaceship broadcasting coordinates, he realized the fight was far from over. They're watching, Lyra murmured, her expression grim yet resolute, and they won't stop until they get what they want. Ethan nodded, gripping the plasma lighter in his pocket. Whatever lay ahead, he was ready.